And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show. I am your host, Jared Morris. I am here with Andy Bottoms, and we are here to break down Indiana's opening round loss. Actually, not an opening round loss if we're looking at the bright side, because we've already played one game in Maui, apparently, that home game that we played a little while back. But our first game in Maui to Wake Forest, the Hoosiers lose 82-78 in a game that featured way too many flashbacks to last season for any IU fan, and a game that, I don't know, Andy, I mean, we were just on here trying to process this, and I'm not quite sure what happened, because I was all set to have the banner moment be the 9-0 run that Indiana went on when it was 63-63, a great 9-0 run that was keyed by some great plays by Troy Williams, defense leading to offense. I was really proud of James Blackman Jr., how he, came back from being 0 for 8. He made a 3, made another bucket, and created a shot for Thomas Bryant in that run. It was a really great run for Indiana. They're up 72-63. Wake calls a timeout. You're thinking, okay, put your foot on their throats. Let's get out of here. Let's coast to a 10, 15, 20-point victory. Get ready for Vanderbilt. And then from that point forward, it's like the offense was played with feet in quicksand. Shot selection was terrible. We passed up open looks to just throw the ball out of bounds. And then the defense, which had been much better to start the second half, almost like a reverse of what we saw last year, where Indiana's defense would be good or decent in the first half and then bad in the second half. I was all ready for that storyline, how the defense was going to be better in the second half. And then the same stuff started to happen. Devin Thomas just started abusing Thomas Bryant again down low. The dribble penetration did whatever it wanted. And what ended up happening is an 82-78 loss for the Hoosiers against a Wake Forest team that sure looked good tonight, but isn't supposed to be that good. So, look, we always try and start these shows off with something positive, and so that 9-0 run is the banner moment, because I thought Indiana, we've seen them struggle at the starts of second halves. They came out and played really well today for the most part at the start of the second half. I think it was a 9-2 run to start the second half. It was a 9-0 run after Wake scored the first bucket. And then Wake battled back at 63-63. And that 9-0 run featured everything we want to see from Indiana. They rebounded well. They played fast. They played smart. They made shots. They played defense. Defense led to offense. And I don't know what happened from there. I really don't. Again, it was 72-63, and the final score was 82-78. So, I mean, you do the math, and you can see the kind of run that Wake went on to end the game. And that wasn't supposed to happen with this team, with this point guard, with this new big man, with all of the rest of the experience around the team. And I don't know. I'm at a loss for where to go from here, because Andy and I were just talking that we weren't expecting to come on here and do a show like this, but that's what happened. And so what should have been a banner moment turned into just a really disappointing 6-7 minutes of play to end the game. And it ends with Indiana losing 82-78. And now going on to the losers bracket of Maui. And what's really bad about that is it means that we can't have a show tomorrow. Thanks, Indiana, because I already wasn't going to be able to do it. Andy was only going to be able to do it at night. And so now we're canceling the Assembly Call postgame show for tomorrow. Not by choice. Trust me, it's not by choice. But unless someone's able to pull a miracle out of their hat, we are unlikely to be able to do a show tomorrow, all because Indiana collapsed at the end tonight. All right. I'm going to turn it over now to Andy Bottoms. Let's get to his bottoms line, and then we'll, if you're in the chat, we'll answer your questions in the chat. We'll break this down. Really just a surprisingly dismal performance there from Indiana over those final 5 to 6 minutes. Andy, what's your bottoms line on tonight's IU collapse?
I mean, basketball is a funny game, and sometimes you get exactly what you deserve more often than not, and I thought that was really the difference tonight. I mean, for as well as they played during that one stretch to really begin the second half, and then the 9-0 run that you mentioned. Other than that, I didn't really think IU played all that well. There were certainly stretches in the first half where they scored well, but too many turnovers in the first half against the team that came in, I think, in the bottom 10 of the Pomeroy rankings in terms of forcing turnovers. And I don't know. It was you make the same mistakes over and over again. You get outfought for rebounds over and over again. It's just tough to win that way. And we talked about this before when we, kind of felt like we were complaining about the defense in spots in these first few games. It was really good, but the reality is you're not going to be able to outscore everybody. And even a team that lost at home to Richmond, for God's sake, you You let them get the ball wherever they want. It really doesn't matter, and you allow that confidence to grow. And the only time that Wake really looked shaken was it seemed like when they got up 9, and it seemed like that was the spot where. And I tweeted out when it was 5, and I said, "Can IU get it to double digits, or they let him hang around?" And they got it up to 9, and then it was just some empty trips, and that was what it was toward the end of the game. Is then for as good as the offense had been most of the season, most of the game, that just went away down the stretch. They had guys shooting that that spot of possession doesn't need to end in a Bielfeldt corner 3. Some of the shots that Troy took where he's calling for the ball at the 3-point line, he's going to shoot it. Why? Blackman forced the 3 at the top of the key. Just not a lot of good shots, and not a lot of shots by Yogi, quite honestly. I know he got fouled. He missed one of the free throws. Troy missed a free throw. I just didn't think that he got the ball enough down the stretch, because one of the only baskets they made when they really needed one was one where he went to the basket and got it. I just thought a really poor performance. I thought one that IU probably deserved to lose in the end, even though it seemed like, around the same time that you were thinking, I kind of started to exhale a little bit, and maybe that was a view shared by the rest of the team. But the defense, the pick and roll defense, they went right at Bryant. I'm sure we'll talk about that, so there's no need to belabor it. But I mean, everybody in that place knew there's some play on that last play that Wake Forest had the ball was going to go at Bryant, whether it was a pick and roll, which he had just done an incredibly poor job on the possession before, or whether they're going to have Devin Thomas just shove it down his throat like he did most of the rest of the game. And just seemed completely lost in pick and roll defense, to a point where I know Sam Vecini, one of the CBS guys, tweeted out that he's so bad pick and roll defense, you don't want him on the floor, but then you need him to rebound. And you'd already gotten killed on the glass, so I think they felt like they had to leave him in there. But man, I was hard pressed to figure out. And I know Hartman kind of rolled his ankle, so I don't know if he just couldn't come in, or maybe he wasn't, and I just didn't notice. But that was a spot I would have been looking down there for about anybody to put in there to play pick and roll defense instead of him at the end of the game.
Yeah. I think it's important to say right now, I mean, I'm looking at my Twitter feed, and there's all these people saying they're not going to watch another game till the tourney and season's over and fire this, that, and the other. Look, it's way too early for that. This is November. Even good teams have bad losses in November. So I think that kind of talk is out of bounds, and certainly that's not the kind of thing that we ascribe to here. But I would be careful to not dismiss people who a game like this brings out all of the frustrations, because I feel them too. Because the problem with a game like this is that it just brings back all of the things that we saw last year and all the things that we've seen when Indiana really struggles and when they lose games that they shouldn't lose. Because what really stinks about this, Andy, is you're right. We deserve to lose this game. And, I'm thinking at the end, just escape. Just find a way to win. Whatever you do, just stay in the winner's bracket in Maui. Don't have, what is likely to not be a very good, what's likely to be a bad loss on your resume. Just, find a way somehow. And Indiana couldn't do it. And so I think to the people who are tweeting me right now talking about, this is these are the reasons to fire Crean and won't watch again until the tourney. Slow down. This is a good team. There's still going to be some really good moments. But maybe to those other people who started talking Final Four and, this team's going to win 26, 27 games, maybe this is a slowdown moment for them too, because frankly, the biggest issues that this team faced last year, they were right there on display today. And, and I think we should say this, Andy. I tweeted, I stole the Assembly Call account there. Ryan is live in Maui. It'll be interesting to see, what he has to report. But Robert Johnson was really playing well there for a while, and I tweeted you that the Robert Johnson fan club would be in full effect on the postgame show, and even he was getting abused, late. It wasn't the last bucket Wake scored, but the second to last bucket, Robert, I know there was a pick and roll there, but Robert really didn't fight for position. He wasn't, didn't move very quickly laterally. It wasn't the kind of battling on ball defense that we've seen from Robert Johnson in the time when he's been really leading Indiana with that defensive pressure. And what were your thoughts on Robert? I mean, you mentioned it. Let's talk about it, because there's two things we have to talk about. We're going to get to the out of bounds play in a second, because I don't know what we were doing, and that was mind boggling when you have 3 seconds left. But let's talk about those final 2 possessions defensively. I mean, what could Indiana have done? What should they have done? And is it as simple as, hey, just compete and don't let your guy drive right by you, Greg Graham? Sorry.
Oh, that was good. At least we got a laugh out of that. And a Greg Graham reference, so we doubled up there. That was
well. Good. Yogi didn't make a 3, so we got to get something in today.
Yeah. I thought that Brian has struggled with that all year, where he kind of plays in this no man's land where he doesn't really hedge. He doesn't try to trap the guy, but he doesn't really like just completely back off either. And I thought for the whole game, I'll get to Johnson's, role in that in a minute. I thought for the whole game, IU did a terrible job. They just pressured Wake Forest big guys away from the basket that weren't going to do anything. Devin Thomas is in his 4th year. He's never shot a 3 in 4 years, not on accident, not with the shot clock running down, not ever. And they continue to go and really challenge him on the outside. Hell, you saw the guy shoot free throws. Osterman tweeted out that he turned his feet like at a 45-degree angle to shoot free throws. If the guy makes 3 jumpers from the free throw lane, then fine. But they go run at this guy like he's going to make shots. And I thought they did the same thing on that pick and roll. Like, if anything, he's just going to roll to the basket. Like, back off a little bit. And I agree that Johnson, I thought, didn't really fight through that very well at all. And I don't know, it kind of felt like he's looking at Bryant trying to figure out what he's going to do. But yeah, I mean, I think at that point, you've got to make some of those guys beat you someplace else other than right at the rim. And then the second one, I felt like he was just trying to bide his time and planted to block a shot the whole time. I don't think he retreated quite as much, but he certainly didn't do anything to try to trap. And, Yogi tried to reach in a little bit on the drive. And but at that point, I mean, that guy had shot a lot in the game. So I don't think he had any intention of passing in either of those scenarios. And so I thought Bryant kind of played for the block the second time, just trying to make the more spectacular play. But you've got to, it's unclear what their defensive philosophy is on those, because they really aren't hedging, but they really aren't like hanging back to try to cut off the drive. It's just a constant backpedal where you're just inviting the guy to go to the basket. So you got to pick one or the other, because what you're doing now is basically doing nothing. But I agree. I thought Johnson, particularly on that first one, didn't do a lot to fight through it. And then the second one, I thought he did a little bit better. But Bryant was really just hanging back to try to time it and block the shot. In
our chat, and by the way, if you haven't joined the chat, if you're on a mobile, just scroll down. You can see the chat there. You just need a free Assembly Call account. Go to assemblycall.com/register to get that. Brian asked us, what is this program's identity right now? And I think it's a really good question. This is maybe a good time here after 4 games now to talk about it. I mean, I think we were hoping that this program's identity would start to be, playing 40 solid minutes on both ends of the floor, playing better defense. Obviously, offense is going to lead the way, but with, at least decent defense to help back it up. And I think right now through 4 games, I think you have to say that this program's identity is outscore people. And when you can't outscore people, you're going to have losses like you had tonight. And frankly, as bad as the defense was, and I think I saw Ryan just tweet that Wake Forest scored on 8 of its last 9 possessions. Frankly, it felt a little worse than that. And the rebounding, my goodness, the offensive rebounds that Wake was getting there late. I mean, all first half, I think, they were out rebound. I think they rebounded 65% of their misses in the first half. Indiana did a nice job there for a while, but then at the end of the game, Wake was just getting any rebound they wanted. But the offense there at the end, too, I mean, you mentioned some of the shot selection. I thought Indiana was really attacking during that 9-0 run, and then we just started settling and turning the ball over. And, so I think our identity right now, Brian, people are throwing around, Golden State Warriors, this and that. No, the Golden State Warriors play defense, and they're tough. Indiana can score points right now. And I think that's what we saw tonight against another Power 5 conference team that has athletes comparable to ours. They hit first and we didn't really hit back. And I just thought we got out toughed in a lot of ways. And so I think right now our identity is our offense is really pretty and we can score a lot of points. And sometimes we're engaged on defense on the glass and we look really good, but it's just not a consistent part of what we do. And it disappoints me to say that. I'd hoped it would be better. And there's still a lot of time for that to develop. Again, it's the team's first game away from Assembly Hall. Thomas Bryant, didn't quite look like he was into it early and struggled, and people attacked his weaknesses, and Indiana's going to have to figure out ways to compensate for those. And so there's time for things to develop. Again, the frustrating part about a game like today is the wounds that it opens from last year that we had hoped would kind of stay closed and just got ripped open in terrible fashion. Let's talk real quick about the last play, the out-of-bounds play. There were 3.2 seconds left. Plenty of time for Yogi to get the ball, take a few dribbles, even make a pass to somebody to get a shot. And it's like we thought the only chance we had was the Christian Laettner play. And I believe it took us 2 timeouts to come up with that. I don't know. I mean, if there's 1 second left, I get it. But we had 3 seconds to go. We didn't even get a shot off. Didn't even complete a pass. Was I missing something there? Was there a grand plan that I didn't see? Or was that just a really, really bad use of the time that you had left to try and get a shot off to tie this thing?
Well, I will. Will be a true challenge of whether I can speak of this play without using an expletive, as I did before we started. But I honestly have no idea. I mean, I thought the second timeout was kind of odd because what happened at the end of the first half, when they took that timeout with a minute and something, they threw it. It got tipped out of bounds at about half court, and I thought, well, if that happens again, then you would at least, for as much as I would probably criticize like having the timeouts left, like you could at least have the timeout to use. But no, you took two timeouts in a row to basically throw a Hail Mary down there against a team that has tons of size. So it would be one thing if you had a significant size advantage or you'd shown the ability over the course of the game to really, outcompete them for, loose balls in the air. But the last few minutes had shown that was not going to happen. So yeah, I mean, so if the timeouts are 60 seconds, what happened in the other minute and 58 seconds after we got done saying, well, Colin or Max or whoever it was, we're just going to have you chuck the ball down the floor. Well, what happened in the other parts of that timeout that said that? Or what were the other options that didn't get selected to run? Was there one where we just threw the ball into the stands or tried to hit the scoreboard or threw it to Bill Walton that didn't quite make the cut? I thought that was just,
or to Christian Westford or Jordan Halls, maybe,
or who? Yeah, I mean, at some point, I just don't. That just can't be the best thing that you come up with, and I would much rather. It's a low percent. Everything is a low percentage play at that point, but seems like the lowest of low percentage plays, given what you have, and given how fast Yogi is with the ball, and given the number of guys that you could spot up to shoot. I mean, you get in and Zaislov spotting up somewhere. That has to be a better option than just throwing the ball into a huge crowd of people, where most of the players that you're throwing it into are taller than you. Because even if you catch it down there, I'm not sure what you're going to do with it because there's now 4 Wake Forest guys around you.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't get that. As just saw Alex Bozich tweet that Indiana basically played well for 13 minutes today, and the rest of the performance can't be defended. And he's right. And it can't be defended from the players, can't be defended from the coaches. This was just a really, really poor performance. And let's talk about some individuals. I want to talk about James Blackman Jr. real quick, who I thought was really good during that run. During that 9-0 run, he was really good. He got a couple of rebounds, made some shots. Outside of that, it was one of the worst games he's played, I thought. I mean, he missed his first 8 shots. The 9-2 run Indiana went on to start the second half was actually made more impressive by the fact that 3 possessions were basically killed by James shot hunting. And look, he's a scorer. And so that's a fine line between, when you're just kind of hunting for shots and when you're being aggressive. And we've praised him on here for being, it seems like a more mature offensive game, being smart about looking for his shots. I thought the start of the second half, those were examples of James really trying to force it, almost looking antsy like he hadn't made one yet and just trying to get one to go down. And I thought, I didn't think any of those looks were really good looks, and yeah, I know he got a couple bad bounces on the rims and this, that, and the other. But those are possessions that could have been used in other ways. And then I thought he sat the bench for a while. He came out and played really well during that stretch. And then we didn't hear from him again because he didn't score again. Only had the 3 rebounds, had the 1 assist, had 4 turnovers. So he didn't turn it over in the second half. But, we talked about how in the beginning of the season, we talked about how it was going to be so important. One of the biggest storylines for this team is that Troy and James have to come and play in the big games. And Troy, despite 5 turnovers, and, a couple of just unconscionable turnovers where he rose for a 3 and then tried to pass it. I'm not sure what he was doing. Led the team in scoring with 16 points, was a big catalyst of that run. Did not rebound well tonight, only had the 3 boards, but did get the 5 steals, did have 4 assists. Like, he made some things happen. When Indiana was playing well, I thought Troy was right there in the middle of it. And James really only had that one little stretch, and outside of that, didn't contribute much. And it's got to be both of those guys. And coming into this game, I didn't think Wake was the kind of team where we would have needed great performances from both of them. But this is what happens when one of those guys goes in the tank, is it makes Indiana very ordinary, especially when the team defense isn't there and the rebounding isn't there to pick up the slack. I thought in some ways James Blackman Jr. shot this team out of the game in a couple of stretches there. And, you lose by 4. Maybe with some smarter shot selection on those possessions, you make up a couple of those buckets. So for everything where it really looked like he was playing better in Indiana's last game against Creighton, we saw a lot of the bad James Blackman Jr. today. And that good Troy, bad Troy, good James, bad James, that dichotomy that we've been seeing. I mean, that's what's really going to create the roller coaster for this team. In addition to the defense, is those two guys who are so important not being able to consistently play. Any individual performances? We've talked about Robert Johnson. Any other individual performances for you that stand out for either praise or more likely constructive critique?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Blackman, it was just funny because I thought he played one of his better all around games at IU in that last game out, and obviously competition level is a little bit different, but Creighton shouldn't be a huge step down from what we saw against Wake Forest. But I really thought there was that one stretch. I know exactly which stretch you're talking about. I think he airballed a 3 in it, and he just started pulling the string. Some of the same things we saw him do when he struggled with his shot a little bit last year, but it was just kind of hunting shots. Well, then had that great stretch, really looked engaged, really looked focused, and then had a nice dish there toward the end where he drove and I think got it to Bryant or somebody else in the lane for an easy basket. And and then at the end, Bryant. And then he took that shot at the end where he just dribbled at the top of the key and eventually took a shot. So it was just, again, I feel like it kind of goes back to something that maybe it's just because we've been doing the show for long enough now where we feel like we're saying a lot of the same things over and over again. But man, just some of the recognize what you're doing when you're playing well and what you're not. And when he went to the basket and was aggressive, he was at least more effective in creating things for other guys. And that's what he was so good at in the Creighton game, was creating opportunities for other players. And tonight, by and large, that wasn't what we saw from him. I mean, I don't know if there's anything to add about Troy. He did have 5 steals and 2 blocks. I thought he was really active. Sometimes that was, most of the time that was good. Sometimes it wasn't. There are definitely some times on some of these pick and rolls where, they're firing passes too hard. The big guys didn't look ready to receive the ball. I know that was at least some of his turnovers, and others where guys just weren't even looking with where he was going. So I thought, overall from the, field, he was, 5 of 7 from 2-point range, 1 of 3 from 3. And I thought the 1 3 there, again, in maybe about 5 minutes left, was just, he's standing there clapping for the ball at the top of the key. And I'm just thinking, that's not the shot you need at that point. Bielfeld's another guy that I was kind of interested to talk about. We have touched a little bit on him playing more away from the basket. He shot 2 2-pointers tonight, made them both. One was a putback, and I think another was just a shot around the lane. He had 2 rebounds, no defensive rebounds at all. And only 1 turnover, did pick up 4 fouls. I thought for as much as, Bryant's defense will be much maligned, I'm sure, I didn't think that his was necessarily much better. I thought Thomas was not the least bit afraid to go at either of those guys. And the Bielfeldt corner 3, while he was open, again, is just plenty of time on the shot clock. Not sure that was the shot they needed at that spot. And for him, in a game like this where the other team's got a lot of big guys to grab 2 rebounds and none on the defensive end, I thought is somewhat problematic. And I thought that was just a case where, he played 20 some minutes. You got to get more than that out of him. And I'm not even sure, Bryant had 5 defensive rebounds. I'm not sure anybody else had more than 3 as I kind of scroll down, looking through the list here. And that just, if that has to be a team effort at some point, just to block out some of its size, sure. There was one time when Zeisloff's trying to check out a guy who's, 5-6 inches taller than he is, but that's not the case when you're 6'9". So I think they got to get more if they're going to continue to play him. I thought Hartman really, the fouls took him out of the game. I thought was playing really well, playing as well as anybody defensively when he was in there. Picked up a cheap foul here and there, and then just from then on didn't really seem like he'd get into a rhythm without getting another whistle on him. So that certainly didn't help because he's easily IU's best interior defender, I would say, at this point. And I think that says a lot about what he can do and also says a lot about what the other guys are not doing.
I'm seeing some tweets here from Ryan, who's at the post-game press conference. Robert Johnson's apparently there, said communication and the team's mindset hurt it on defense. What's frustrating about that is just like we kind of say the same things on here, I do feel like we hear the same things in post-game press conferences, and there's only so much you can say. What else is Robert Johnson supposed to say? Clearly, that was the issue, was communication and mindset. But why is that? Why is that the mindset? What is it about what we're doing that we can't develop that more consistent defensive mindset, I guess is the question. I'm just not quite sure. For portions of games early in the season, Indiana has pressured the ball better, done a better job. And I guess I don't understand why now in your first game, playing against a decent opponent, Creighton was a good opponent too, but against another team that you should respect based on the jersey. It's not like you're playing Alcorn State. This is Wake Forest in Maui in a big tournament. You got a big fan support. Why isn't the defensive mentality better? I guess I don't. People, and the reason I'm bringing this up is I saw people ask in the chat. People have asked on Twitter, and I don't know. You would think that it would be. And I don't really have any answers for that. And I don't. Clearly Wake did a really good job of finding Indiana's weaknesses. And, say this about Crean. And Andy, I want to get your thoughts on that. Is, Crean does a lot of good things as a coach, in terms of building the program. I think he's good at getting an initial game plan together. I think he's good at coaching offense. One thing that we have seen is he is not good at adjusting in game. When a team is just doing something and doing something and doing something, they tend to keep doing it against us because we don't adjust. And when there's a particular defense that's really frustrating us, a lot of times we can't adjust. And that really seemed to bite Indiana today. I mean, would you rank that up there among Crean's biggest challenges as a coach? And it kind of gets highlighted on a night like tonight. Like, if the mentality is there, why can't we get the mentality there? Like, why can't we do something in the middle of the game to change that, to change what we're doing? It just seems like sometimes these snowballs start going and we'll get a little run there for a little bit, but it's never really sustained in the game, and we have what happened tonight.
Yeah, I really thought the beginning of the second half, they did come out with more defensive intensity. And I think that's what's frustrating, is that you see it in these stretches and you see that they recognize the importance of it at times, and then it just completely goes away. It doesn't slightly go, it's just gone. And they played really well defensively, got themselves back in the game. They really closed the first half really poorly. And then you come out and you get yourself back in the game, and then they really just traded baskets for a little while, and then there was that spurt where they got up 9-0, and then really just collapsed on the stretch. I don't know what that is. I definitely thought, if we're talking X's and O's kind of stuff tonight, I definitely did not understand the insistence on pressuring Wake Forest big guys outside. I thought that opened up a lot of lanes to the basket for those guys, and other players on the team as well. Just didn't really make sense to me. Wake came in not shooting great from three. They did shoot the ball well tonight, but I guess I would rather, take my chances with that than I would, getting burned inside. I mean, they came into the game shooting less than 30% from three on the season. They shot 6 of 14 tonight, and Wilbekin hit a couple, off balance, crazy shots. But I'll take my chances with that as opposed to a 6'9" guy coming like a freight train toward the basket. So I just thought that was one thing I didn't really understand. I was also a little bit surprised that, even though I probably would have, full disclosure, I probably would have complained about this, but at a certain point, like, would you not try a zone to try to keep the ball from getting into the paint and stopping the drive? That's one thing that people have looked at with, some of the new rules about, fouls on the ball and pressuring, like, would more teams play zone just to try to shut off driving lanes and things like that. I'm not sure it would have worked, but I'm not sure it would have been worse than what was going on. And you could say the rebounding against the zone is a challenge, but they weren't rebounding well anyway. So it did feel a lot like defensively we kept doing the same things we were doing that weren't working. So if you want to talk X and O's, I guess I would say that. I mean, I think offensively down the stretch, in terms of who ended up with the ball, I thought was a question mark. I know Troy got fouled on that one, but I just didn't feel like Yogi touched the ball enough down the stretch for IU. And I guess if I'm going to live and die with somebody, he's the guy at this point that I would like to do that with. So that was the only thing. Some of that is just, the flow of what's going on out there. And I don't necessarily put that on coaching, but do you take a timeout and try to, design a play that gets him the ball in space so that he can either drive and score or create things for other guys? So I think it's a fair criticism, and it's going to be a criticism, quite honestly, because it's something that's come up and been an issue over the course of time. So I don't think that's going away anytime soon. But it definitely is also frustrating from a player standpoint that the same guys who can come out and really play their butts off on defense to start the second half, that just goes away at some point during the half. And I was a little bit surprised to see they didn't, I know Anunoby and or Abdelnaby or whatever Bill Walton called him during the game. He played a couple minutes. Juwan Morgan only played a couple minutes toward the end of the first half. I mean, those guys certainly would have been challenged offensively, but, can you get somebody in there that can stay in position? Do you put a Ryan Burton in or somebody like that? I think we saw this whole, kind of thrown out the whole like bench as motivator thing. And to a certain extent in the front court, when you're two, big guys that are playing the most minutes and Bielfeldt and Bryan aren't playing well, I know you don't have a lot of alternatives, but do you try to do something different there? I don't know. It just seemed like defensively trying the same thing over and over again. And at no point other than, one stretch did it really seem effective.
Yeah, I really agree with you on Yogi. He was one guy who was really battling for boards. He had 5 offensive boards. He did have 5 assists, didn't turn it over. And he actually led the team in shots with 11. Troy and Robert Johnson both had 10. But I agree. I think that's a game. And Yogi did it. There was a play late. I don't know where it was, but Wake had started going on a little bit of a run, and we called timeout, and out of the timeout, you mentioned this earlier, Yogi just took the ball, took it right to the cup, and scored. And I was like, okay, there we go. And you feel better because your senior leader steps up, gets a bucket, and I would have liked to see more of that from him. I really thought, Brian mentioned this in the chat, did we get selfish or out of control offensively at the end of the game? And I don't know about selfish because I just don't think that this team plays selfishly offensively for the most part. But I just thought we stopped doing a lot of the things that we were doing. I mean, this is one of those where I think when you look at the stat sheet, there's some things that you can be somewhat, feel okay about, like 17 assists on 26 made baskets. I mean, that's a 65% assist ratio. Free throws, we got to the line, 22 free throws. But, we didn't do that at the end of the game. And we did get those free throws at the end of the game. We didn't make enough of them. And I thought we stopped kind of moving the ball and doing what we do when we're playing good offense. They're late. It's like, we started slowing the ball down. And that's just not us. Like, even when we're trying to protect a lead, we just got to play. We just got to go, because what ends up happening is we get stagnant. We don't get a good shot because we're just not that good in slow it down half-court offense. And then we know we're going to give it up on the other end. So unless we are going to be a team that embraces the physicality of the game, and we just saw Ryan tweet that's what Max Bielfeldt said, that Indiana needs to embrace the physicality of the game. Until we're going to do that and play defense, then we've got to keep playing offense for 40 minutes. Because, again, it comes back to this question of what's our identity. Right now, our identity is that we play at a fast pace and we score points. So we need to do that at least for 40 minutes, because I think the problem is we became just this puddle of nothing at the end of the game because we weren't going to defend. But, okay, we didn't come in with a great defense. But that offense that really got moving there toward the middle part of the second half, we just let that go too. And, I would like to see whether it's Crean, whether it's Yogi, and, Troy certainly tried, but even he at the end of the game, he did have the one drive where he got fouled, but, clapping for the 3-point shot. That's, we don't need Troy shooting threes in close games in the second half, and I don't know. It's frustrating, I think, to all of us, because you see it there, you see the potential, but then you just see these same mistakes over and over again. I know we all think that if we were in the huddle, we could, tell the guys, hey, play some defense, box out, get the ball into the paint on offense, do all these things. For some reason, the message isn't getting across consistently enough, and we have games like this. I do want to point out, even Ryan is not immune to criticism tonight. He reported that Max Bielfeldt is doing a nice job at the podium, and even that got criticism with a, really, this is what we're reporting? So even even our reporting from the press conference, everything tonight open for criticism. But I will say that's a perfectly valid thing to report, because, just because the guys played a bad game, it doesn't mean that, we're not supporting them, that we're not cheering for them, that we don't want them to conduct themselves well in the press conference. This is all part of what's happening. And so, yes, it's all fair to report. I don't know what else there is to say about this game, Andy. Maybe as we go through here, we'll see a few questions and we can answer them. But you have an interesting point, and I want to hit this. You mentioned how losing this game could really impact Indiana's strength of schedule. You want to explain what you mean?
Yeah, and Justin Albers just tweeted something similar. So, when everybody looked at the schedule at the beginning of the season, it was kind of like, get this game, you get a game against a really good Wake Forest team, and then even if you lose that, you're probably playing somebody pretty good in the semifinals or the finals. So you've played two good teams. So now you play St. John's today, who got boat raced by Vanderbilt and is generally terrible. And then you're going to play, assuming you win that, you're probably going to end up playing whoever loses the UCLA UNLV game tonight, because Kansas plays Chaminade and then UCLA and UNLV play later. And both those teams are, UCLA is probably a little bit more than like a fringe tournament team. UNLV is probably a bubble team. They have a lot of talent. as they've had over the last couple of years, but they really haven't ever been able to put that together. So, so now you're playing those kinds of teams. You're not getting another, I'd be shocked if Vanderbilt isn't eventually a, top 25 RPI team by the end of the season and really feel like a clear-cut second-place team in the SEC. And, so you really miss out on good opportunities there. And in a season when, there are some tough games, they do go to Duke. That's obviously going to be tough, and Notre Dame's going to be tough, but there really aren't a lot of other tough games left on the non-conference schedule. So you damn sure better beat whoever you end up playing on Wednesday, because you come away from this thing at 1-2. I mean, if they lose to St. John's tomorrow, it'll be a good thing that we're not doing a show, but it will, that really ends up hurting. And I know there's no way to predict that and all those kinds of things, but you really lost out on a couple chances to not only better your team through, playing against better competition, but also just, to better what your overall numbers look like at the end of the season.
Yeah, and which just adds to the disappointment of this loss for Indiana. Again, 82-78. The final, we haven't given the point per possession numbers yet. Wake ends up at 1.12 points per possession, which again was better than the totally dismal first half. But even that is probably a little misleading, because I'd love to know what their points per possession was there over those final 4 or 5 minutes, because it was probably close to 2. Indiana only 1.08 points per possession. Crean apparently not very happy in the post-game press conference. Not surprising. Yeah, Andy, you just mentioned here Crean's comment about losing it as much on offense as defense, which is basically what we just said. I mean, because even if Indiana just keeps scoring there at the end, and Wake gets to 82, and Indiana's got 84, 86 points because they keep running their offense, we escape, we exhale, we come on here and criticize the defense, but we're ready to go tomorrow, instead of what really feels like a debilitating loss. And I know they all feel like that when we're in the midst of them. But I don't know, something about this just feels really disappointing, because I think none of us really saw it coming, really expected, with how the team played in that second half against Creighton, or the first half against Creighton, really the whole game, to really build some momentum, get excited. I was talking with Heather earlier today about how, the Maui championship game is going to be, 10 o'clock Wednesday night. And maybe, Andy, maybe this was the problem. Maybe everybody was looking too far ahead. I mean, do you put any credence into that? Because, Crean's talking about how, he's waiting for someone to remember that, to take away Devin Thomas's left hand, and disappointed in his own substitutions and our toughness and all of this. Maybe the team was looking ahead just as much as the fans were. Because frankly, I mean, and I'm sure you were doing this too, listening, kind of planning your viewing schedule around Indiana winning the first game, and then maybe you're looking, okay, if they beat Vanderbilt, if they lose to Vanderbilt, what's going to happen there? Maybe the team was doing the same thing, because they certainly seem like they came out with less focus and enthusiasm than we've seen from them in any game this year. And yeah, maybe a part of that's being away from Assembly Hall, but grow up, guys. I mean, you're going to play a lot of games away from Assembly Hall. Do you think that could be a factor, that this team just looked past Wake and didn't wake up early enough in the game, and really, except for a few stretches, didn't wake up at all, and it came back to bite them?
I mean, I guess I buy that to a certain extent. Like, maybe you can write the first half off to that, but I mean, you're that far into the game and you're up 9 at that point. Like, you kind of know what's happened. They've already hit you in the mouth a few times. I feel like that should go away at that point. And to me, there, you've weathered the storm of, if you have looked past it, you've weathered that storm, you've managed to get the lead back, then finish the game. So I just, I don't know. There a couple of these quotes just, we didn't play the post-up game the right way. No question we should have changed defense on them. That's your job. You know who could have changed the defense? You could have. Why are we after the game saying like, oh, well, we didn't take away his left hand? Put in somebody who will. I just don't understand where, like, that's great that you come out and say that after the game, but so what at that point? Oh, we should have changed defenses. Well, that's terrific. We should have done 10 other things, but that's your job to make that in the game. And it's comments like that that get people, like me, apparently, agitated about these in-game adjustments, because it's you who's not doing them, and then you're admitting that you're not doing them, and then you're going to do the same damn thing when you get another game, and then you make the same comment, well, I should have done something different. Good, then do it. I don't understand why that's happening. And to the point about the comments about losing as much on offense as defense, I think, somebody tweeted out, you should win when you score 78 points a game. I mean,
yeah, it was Nick Baumgart.
To say that, I mean, obviously the offense was an issue. We did talk about that, but to say that anything other than this team's complete lack of defense for, a year and a few games so far is less of a reason for losing than offense, I think, is probably a little bit off as well. But I don't understand why. I have no idea what I would do if I was a coach. Luckily, we don't have press conferences after my daughter's, third and fourth grade basketball game. But I'm not sure what I would
see
say.
One though.
Well, my wife gets those at home after when we talk about the game later after the kids have gone to bed.
Can you just set up a podium and we'll just do one assembly call or just do one post game for you? It would be great.
That would be outstanding. I would have had some really good comments after the game we played on Saturday. So it probably would have been enlightening as to my coaching philosophy in a recreational league versus others who just want to have two players shoot the ball.
Oh man, this is one of those shows.
Go ahead.
No, this is right now. What just happened is what happened in Indiana in those last few plays. Lack of communication, no execution. The end of the show is basically finishing up just like the end of IU's game. I was going to say, I feel like sometimes we laugh on these shows because it's easier than crying after these tough losses. Anyway, I don't know what else to say. I mean, it's a really disappointing effort. Andy, I agree with you. I mean, I think that, we can talk about, and we have, how the offensive failures at the end, I think in a lot of ways, those did cost Indiana the game because we're a team that needs to outscore people. And sadly, that's what became clear tonight, because if we're not going to communicate on defense, if we're not going to play with toughness, we saw in the chat, your first game away from home reveals a lot of your character. Vandy went out and smashed St. John's, and we came out and smashed ourselves. And so I guess that's what was revealed tonight. And let me ask you this. So Indiana plays St. John's tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
What on earth do we expect from this game?
I mean, who knows? St. John's so far has beaten, I was just looking this up. They've beat Wagner by 9. They lost an exhibition game to somebody pretty badly, as I recall. They beat University of Maryland, Baltimore County by 2. They beat Rutgers by 2 in a game that they really had to come back to win, I believe. And then they got beat by 37 today. So this will be a good what did we say last year? The movable force against the what was it? I forget.
Stoppable object.
I forget. Yeah, I don't know. Whatever it is. Their offense currently on Pomeroy is ranked 244th. So this will be a.
So if we give up 1.2 points per possession to them, maybe just cancel Thanksgiving.
It's probably wise. Probably wise. Yeah. So that'll be a good litmus test. I mean, that's worse. That's probably worse than some of the other teams that IU's already played. That might be worse than like Austin P or Eastern Illinois. So they're pretty brutal offensively. Chris Mullen is the coach. That's exciting. But they got a lot of young guys. They don't have a ton of size. It doesn't look like as I kind of scroll through the roster. I think they were pretty much universally picked to finish last in the Big East. So it is most certainly a game that IU should win. And then, like I said, probably end up playing, whoever loses the UCLA UNLV game tonight, because I would assume whoever loses that will beat Chaminade, barring a surprising Chaminade upset of Kansas. Perhaps what IU should root for the most is for Chaminade to win tonight, so they still have a crack at Kansas in the 5th place game of the tournament.
Yes.
Well, at least my scheduling concerns, my strength of schedule concerns can be helped.
Yeah. I think let's wrap up here. I will say, if Indiana somehow finds a way to lose to St. John's, and if I don't show up for my 7:00 wedding on Wednesday, please look in the gutters around my house in Dallas. You may find me there laying with a bottle, because I think that would just be more than I can take. But on a serious point, I think tomorrow is really important for Indiana to come out and play with a different mentality. Because Indiana may be able to play kind of a poor game and beat St. John's because we're just athletic and talented and can score points. But the point tomorrow is come out, like all these things that we see people talking about right now: lack of communication, lack of toughness, lack of physicality, all of these things that we've heard them talk about. Now, can we actually translate that into action? Because you're so right, Andy. That's the big frustration, is we see all these things and we hear all these things in the post-game press conference, and then nothing happens. And I think that's what's so important tomorrow, Does this team come out and play with more physicality, play with a different mentality, do all the things that we didn't do tonight? Can we translate that? Even though it's a quick turnaround, who cares? Does this team have the intestinal fortitude, the internal leadership, the leadership from the coaching staff, the accountability to do that? Because if so, and if we can do that and then play another nice game on Wednesday, maybe we can take some momentum out of this. And maybe at some point we can look back on this as just a bad memory, a blip on the radar when the team didn't bring their A game and they learned what can happen against any opponent when they do that. There's a narrative that can work for that. I'm telling myself that in my head right now to make the rest of this night easier. But if not, then we're setting ourselves up for more of what we saw last year, which is extremely frustrating to everybody. So I think that's what to watch. That's what we need to watch for tomorrow. Does this team come out with a different mentality, play up to its own level, up to its own potential, instead of just playing against the score, which may be in Indiana's favor. But then again, maybe we shouldn't take any opponents lightly, because clearly doing that tonight didn't help. Anyway, quick programming note. We are very unlikely to have a show tomorrow. We had it worked out if Indiana had won to be able to do it. I am unavailable Tuesday and Wednesday. I'm getting married Wednesday night, which is obviously very exciting, but will cause me to miss the shows. And we thought we had it worked out, but Andy is going to be unable to host. So unless one of the interns is able to do it or something happens, but follow the Assembly Call account. Ryan is there. He's tweeting from Maui, so he's in Maui. So keep your eyes on the account. He'll be tweeting stuff to keep you updated. But quite definitely no halftime show. Quite possibly no post-game show tomorrow, and then maybe on Wednesday as well. We'll just have to play that one by ear. So we'll see. Let's go to some final thoughts and close this up. Andy, you go first.
Well, unfortunately, as I have the TV on ESPN2 where I'm watching, they just showed a montage of empty IU possessions toward the end of the game. So that just, rub a little extra salt in the wound there. I think it's funny. I'll bring this back again to to my vast coaching experience with my daughter's team. But it's funny. There's a lot of kids this year who are having less success than they had last year because they're playing against kids who are a little bit bigger, a little bit taller, and things like that. And they very much equate playing well to scoring. And after one of the games, when we actually did play a really good game, you can kind of point around to everybody and say, here's what you did to help us win and help us play well that didn't have anything to do with scoring. And right now, I feel like this team is a lot of if we don't score a bunch of points, I don't play well. That's where that mentality comes to, like, well, the offense hurt us as much as the defense. That, to me, is not true. I mean, you're scoring almost 80 points in a game that was pretty fast-paced. I get that there's points per possession and all that stuff, but I mean, this team has to learn after these last couple seasons that there are a hell of a lot of ways that you can impact a basketball game other than putting the ball in the basket. Blocking out, playing good defense, ripping the ball away from somebody, saving it, getting on the floor. There's a million things that you can do to have a positive impact, setting up a teammate, setting a screen, that have nothing to do with scoring. And it seems like this team continues to take its defensive identity from how well it's playing on the offensive end, and sometimes not even that, and really loses sight of that in huge stretches of the game. Yet there are times when you see it. And I think for me, that's what's the most frustrating, is that you do see it in stretches. They're not perfect. Nobody's asking them to be an elite defensive team, but you see that they can do it. And then it just goes away, like we talked about earlier. And I think until they get enough guys that figure out that it isn't the 3-pointers I shoot, it isn't some of these selfish shots, it isn't whatever, it's doing the little things to be in position to cut off a guy driving with the ball, or taking away a guy's left hand who's going that way every single time, or backing off of a guy who's never shot a 3 and never shot the ball outside of 15 feet before, then I'm not really sure how things turn around. I mean, I agree with you that, tomorrow's game should be another game that makes everybody feel good and think that things look great. But, until you see the other things consistently and doing the little things to win, this team has a whole bunch of guys that can score. I don't know if they have a whole bunch of guys who give a damn about what they're doing on the defensive end.
Well said, Andy. As is his custom, Chronic Hoosier with a great tweet that kind of sums up where things are right now. I think both subconsciously and consciously, we've all been looking for reasons why this year will be different from last. Well, here's this tweet. 1 year ago and 1 year and 1 day ago, IU is a 12-point favorite versus Eastern Washington and lost by 2. IU is a 13-point favorite tonight and lost by 4. So, yeah. Obviously, the difference there is that Eastern Washington game was at home. This game was in Maui, but a game against a team that we should beat. And I think last year was it Venky Joyce or Janky Voice? I never know what his name is. I apologize to him because he was incredible against us. And it was almost the same thing. I mean, just did whatever they wanted. Tonight, Wake did whatever they wanted for large stretches of the game. And I think, look, I don't know. It seems too early to say that this is kind of a soul-searching moment for Indiana, but I think it really is. And I think it is for all the reasons that you just said, Andy, because guys have to realize that it starts on the defensive end and that we know Indiana can score, but until the other half of the court becomes consistently important to the Hoosiers, then there are going to be games like this, games where we just can't outscore folks. And that's what happened tonight. And unfortunately, that is our identity. And it's the identity of a good team, an occasionally exciting team, a team that can probably still make the NCAA tournament, but not a team that can compete for Big Ten championships or that will be consistent enough to make any type of run in March. In a lot of ways, it's a team a lot like last year's, which we didn't want it to be. So we will see if Indiana can turn it around. Perhaps good, perhaps not. They can't dwell on this loss for very long. They got to get right back up and play tomorrow. Let's hope that we see a team with a different mentality, a better mentality, a tougher mentality, ready to compete. Because Indiana just wasn't up to the challenge tonight, and Wake took it to them, and Wake got a win that they very much deserve. Congratulations to them. But I think we learned a lot about Indiana tonight. Unfortunately, we learned some things we didn't want to learn. I think we can learn some things about Indiana tomorrow, and hopefully those lessons are much more pleasant than tonight's. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in live. Thank you for everybody who listened on the podcast. Again, probably no show tomorrow, probably no show Wednesday, but follow us at Assembly Call. Make sure you get on the email list, assemblycall.com/subscribe. We'll send updates and let you know what the schedule is. But let's hope Indiana can win these final 2 games in Maui, take some momentum home. Certainly things look and feel bleak tonight, and that's not how it was supposed to be. So let's hope we can rebound, get it going on a more positive tone for the rest of the week leading into Thanksgiving. We'll talk to you soon, everybody.